Hi, I'm here with Kasia Wiacek. Kasia is a sourcing manager formerly at Uber, Facebook, and we met via Chartloop. Kasia shared with me some incredible perspectives on recruitment, and I'm so excited for her to join us today.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all.
Awesome. So you've been part of some meteoric Silicon Valley startups turned giants like Facebook, like Uber, and others. Can you tell us a little bit about the sourcing functions at these companies? What did your team look like? What were some of the activities you guys were using?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, it obviously varied and has changed so much even in the past few years. When I was at Facebook back in 2014. I started in 2014 and ended up leaving in 2015, where I was a sourcer there. And the sourcing function was definitely seen as something critical to the recruiting organization as a whole. There was a lot of value in what sourcers could provide. And I found that at these larger organizations, sourcing was a separate function. So you did have sourcers specifically going in and building pipelines and managing the front end of the process in recruiting. And so it was very much seen as a partnership function to recruiting, and sourcers were brought into conversations with hiring managers consistently. They provided, updates on pipelines, on the growth of, the pipeline and how they're building, the understanding and knowledge of a function that can help the whole recruiting team move forward and hire the best talent for that division. So that was, it was great to see that. Often at smaller companies, I think the sourcing function is embedded into what a recruiter does. There's limited amounts of resources, so a recruiter has to oversee both sourcing and the recruiting and the later stages of the function. So it was great to see this. And that's what made me understand that sourcing could be so much more, and that there's much depth to it and many layers. So just the understanding that it's a separate function, there's value, there's a lot of data you can pull from that, and help build a strong function with whatever division you're hiring for with that knowledge.
Awesome. No, fantastic. And would you say that varied depending on the culture of the company, whether it was like a separate research function or a smaller initiative within sourcing?
Yeah, so when I was at Facebook, there was no separate research function actually. So that's something that I've learned. They've built out in the past few years. I forget the name of it. I believe it's called Global Talent Insights, but I think that may be what it's called at Facebook. And at Uber, we didn't necessarily have that either. There was one person that was hired to be a researcher, and that person focused within a specific function and grouping for product, I believe it was. So I do think that they're starting to, at least from what I've seen within the tech space, or the tech organizations, they are starting to put a focus on it. My understanding is that some of these larger, more established organizations, these divisions already exist, or even, for example, at Randstad, I believe there's a division called SourceRight where they have built out like a very focused sourcing function, which is very research heavy as well. So there's definitely value, and it's definitely something there's more focus on it for sure.
Fascinating. So Aaron Lentz, who's a respected internal sourcer, also like formerly a programmer, so he knows the whole data side of things, told me once that internal sourcers spend a lot of time mapping, competitor firms, understanding, where they can go and recruit from. But still, like a hub for all that activity is LinkedIn's right talent insight, but that data is still not really indexed or aligned. What were your experiences around that, and how would you use the different data tools to source and build a pipeline?
Yeah, and so I think after becoming a manager, I also realized the value of some of these things that I wasn't even doing myself as a sourcer. I will tell you, when I was sourcing as an individual contributor, I did build out internal talent maps to really understand the internal organization and see the backgrounds of the folks that were working at the company that could then help me see, where we're hiring from. And then I can build out competitor lists within a function that matters that I'm hiring for from those from those companies, almost like this tangential kind of mapping. And so I built upon that. But all of it, it was all research done through potentially just LinkedIn searches, LinkedIn Recruiter, LinkedIn Public. If I was coming across, anything just like via Google, any organizations or associations, and like building out lists that way, but then housing it all myself in a spreadsheet, and there was never any place that you could pull all that information. Not that I had experienced myself or seen myself. Of course, you could use, orgchart like tools or design tools that help you, kind of like flow chart tools to build something out yourself, but that also takes time and is very manual. So for my team, we didn't necessarily do a lot of that. It was something that we were starting to build. At Uber, there was a researcher who put together a template for us so that we could easily collect insights and organize them and then present them to our hiring managers. It was, just a slide template, which was really great and super helpful and easy to plug in information that we were pulling from LinkedIn. But we were just starting to kind of dig into that and build that out. So I could see that there would be a lot that we could do for the future, and a lot of value that could be brought to the table with something that was just a lot less manual, a little automatic, and something that could be centralized.
Right. No, absolutely. Definitely key to streamline that competitive mapping. So, since you've been with, some of the most cutting edge companies, specifically in tech, I wanted to ask you, what was your tech stack like? Like you mentioned, you were at Uber, you were at Facebook, you were at a smaller startup. Did you feel that having, superior stack of tools, give you a big advantage in the way you guys were sourcing?
Oh yeah, I definitely think so. I think that, like for example, at Facebook, there was a proprietary tool, a sourcing tool that was built out. That was my first experience working with something that would be considered a sourcing tool, and so it just blew my mind that I could easily see who on our team last reached out to these folks, be able to see where these folks came from previously, when they last interviewed. It was just a space to house all of the information. And so that was really, really great to see. At the time, I think when I was at Facebook, they were also using Salesforce as the applicant tracking system, though we didn't do a lot of work there as sourcers because a lot of information was housed in the sourcing tool. And so that was great. Obviously, I spent a lot of my time on LinkedIn Recruiter, and that's where I found a lot of candidates. I, at the time, was working on product marketing analytics. So I also did just, general Google searches and all of that, and just, digging through associations. And a lot of work outside of that. But at Uber, I think what really changed the game for us too was when we had LinkedIn Talent Insights, and I think that just showed it was like a quick and efficient way to understand the market without having to do a lot of research on your own and collect this data manually and organize it yourself. And it was all there and easily accessible. Of course, there's nuances to it. You couldn't necessarily search for whatever you wanted. There were certain, terms and titles that you had to search through and all of that. But it was incredibly valuable when you could bring, all of this organized data about a function to a hiring manager, and they could see what the market looked like for a role they were hiring for, and some of the other companies we should be targeting, and some of the titles that they're seeing, and some new technologies that are being used that we're seeing. So yeah, it's just, it makes life much easier. And it's, as a sourcer, or even, if people have access to it, it's not necessarily that every recruiter is going to have time to look through it, but as within a sourcing function, that could be embedded into what your role is, and that you have the responsibility of understanding that market and then bringing that information to the recruiter, the hiring manager, even your recruiting manager, even your director of recruiting, if they're building, or even the HR managers or directors, so they could see maybe where we should be targeting hiring in location wise in the future. Things like that are incredibly, I think, important and critical, and can kind of help an organization decide where they want to build and grow.
Right. No, super. So definitely having an advanced toolkit and also data sources can really maybe be a game changer for sourcing. So what would you say were some unique challenges that you faced as a sourcing manager, working for such companies in hypergrowth? I'm assuming things, were changing every quarter, every few months.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was pivoting and changing. I think even to some degree, sometimes sourcing can be seen as like a stepping stone function to move you into the recruiting role. That's a little bit more, there's different aspects of it. But that was something that I think I really wanted to focus on, was to try to show our organization and our teams and our recruiters that sourcing is so much more. There's an analytical aspect to it. There's research, there's data that you can bring to the table and really kind of separate yourself from others. And of course, within recruiting, you could do the same thing. Of course, if you're focusing on the second half of the process, there's a lot of data and information that you can bring to the table there. But yeah, I think pivoting and then just being able to also show that there's so much more to this function than just plugging in a keyword and pulling up a profile. I think sometimes, but I do sometimes think that there was also this level of this expectation that you're just plugging in some words and you're getting some profiles, and it's a little bit more than that. It takes time to also build your understanding of a space and become and it's interesting because you can have the title like, oh yeah, we're hiring a project manager. There's project managers in every function. You have to understand the function that you're also working within as well, and that takes time to build that knowledge. And that's, I think, something just within recruiting as a whole. You want to be able to, build your knowledge of the space and become as much of a subject matter expert within that group without necessarily doing the job. You're never going to actually be doing the role, but you want to come to the table with a lot of good information to show the hiring team and whoever that you have an understanding.
Right. So very cool. So it's almost like you're your own kind of product manager, building your own process, finding tools, right, data, and with expertise in your own given market or role. So super cool. Would you say COVID has influenced the way sourcing has been done at these bigger companies? Like there's a lot of layoffs. Is talent a lot more available now, or not really? No big changes.
Yeah, definitely changes for sure. I think it varies from company to company. This is just from my own experience. During the time that COVID started and while I was still at Uber, there was kind of a pause on hiring. And so just a reassessment of what's going on with the business and trying to make sure that we were thoughtful about how we want to move forward, or how they were moving forward. At the time, it was we. And so initially, I think that there was this understanding that, yes, there is talent out there. People started to put together layoffs lists. There was this like almost community that was starting to build from the folks that were laid off. I experienced this too myself, just having been laid off, and knowing that you have a community that you can work with and share information with and knowledge. And somebody had built like a put together a Slack channel for us and all of that. But yes, there was definitely changes, slowdowns. I think right now things are starting to pick up. There was this almost like this refocus, and I want to say it was thinking more so about how we can build pipelines, how we can build relationships with future candidates, so that when hiring lifts again, we can easily kind of build those pipelines quickly. The pipelines already exist, and we can just put them through the process. And so there's conversations around that and how we want to communicate as a brand to these folks so that they know what we're doing in this time of COVID, how we're supporting our communities, how we're supporting, healthcare professionals and essential workers and all that. So there was a little bit of that too, but yeah, it was, it's been difficult. I think that's the main takeaway from all of this.
Yeah.
But building a community and working together is important, I think.
For sure. New territory for everybody. Even these hottest companies that everybody thought are totally immune. Kind of need to recalculate their whole approach. All right, Kasia, this is fantastic. So three questions for you to wrap up. So do you maybe have a favorite book on sourcing?
I don't necessarily have a favorite book. I mean, I did study labor relations and human resources, so there were many textbooks that I read, but I don't necessarily have a book. But I will say two things. When I first started in sourcing, what someone shared with us, we had a consultant come into the company that I was working at the time, and shared with us Glenn Cathy's Boolean Black Belt blog, which he no longer updates, but that was where I learned a lot about sourcing. And this is specific to sourcing, not necessarily HR, because HR is just such a large umbrella of all of this. But and that's where I really learned about Boolean and just, sourcing in general. But more recently, it's the SourceCon blog. I think that's where I learn a lot about different extensions and tools. Just, again, a community of sourcers that I can go to and learn from, just to show, the depth of what sourcing truly is, which is really exciting. But yeah, I think those were this is, we're in a new age, so digital and blog.
Right. Right. No, that's fantastic. Is there one thing that your 20-year-old self, if you knew, you'd change or tweak about your career?
Wouldn't necessarily change anything, because I think, I am a believer in things happen for the reasons they happen for. But I think telling myself that first of all, you can make a career really out of anything that you might have an interest in or a passion. There might be some tweaks that you need to adjust, but for me personally, it would have been to tell myself that, you can make a career out of sourcing, and it's something that you will learn to love and build upon, and it will take away from things that you as a student or as a kid really enjoyed. And digging in and researching and all of that are all things I care about. So that's something I think I would tell myself, that yeah, you can make a career out of anything, and sourcing will be yours, and you can own that.
Right. Love it. No, that's fantastic. Where can people find you online?
Oh, you can find me on LinkedIn. At Kasia Wiacek. Yeah. Yeah. Or well, my Instagram is private, so that wouldn't be a place. But I've just rejoined Twitter too. At Kasia was
nice.
Here, WUZ here. But yeah, also a place where I'm trying to get more into just like connecting with sourcing professionals. And yeah, that's a great place for that.
That's awesome. Well, here we have it. Kasia Wiacek, sourcing manager, formerly at Facebook, Uber, a bunch of other cool startups. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thanks so much, Sean.